Welcome inside the latest BR NHL Insider Notebook. I'm Frank Seravalli, and it is a Tuesday, December 2nd edition of the show. We're streaming live on the BR app as well as on YouTube. Get your questions, comments, concerns, trade proposals, rumors, anything you want. Throw it in the chat. Let's make this an interactive back and forth show. I'm happy to take your questions over the next 30 minutes or so. So, the calendar has turned to December. We are 3 weeks away from the NHL's trade freeze, the holiday roster freeze. And so everyone's wondering, will we see any action before the trade freeze locks everyone into place for the holidays? And I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not, but it's never too early with the NHL's trade deadline now about 130 days away until March to get in some trade questions and trade deadline target conversations. So at the top of everyone's list, of course, as we head toward the holidays, the shopping list for the trade target season is Rasmus Andersson, the defenseman from the Calgary Flames. We know this season has not turned out the way that the Flames envisioned. We know that Rasmus Andersson will be on the move at some point. It's a matter of when and where. But as the premier rental defenseman available, the Flames have the market cornered, which is why they've been patient to this point in time in not trying to force a trade now, despite a slow start to the season. They're going to let the market develop and see which teams are authentically in the race and which teams aren't before making any decisions to have a full concept and grasp of the market. Who else is on our trade board? Well, you can throw in any of the pending unrestricted free agents from the Vancouver Canucks, which we've talked about after they sent a memo last week. You could talk about some of the vets on the Nashville Predators, including Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault. You could talk about the St. Louis Blues and their disaster of a season, including captain and center Braden Shen, probably a couple of their veteran defensemen that they've been trying to move that have no trade clauses for the last couple of years. And oh, by the way, a brutal season so far for Jordan Binnington, who was pulled from Monday's game against the Anaheim Ducks after allowing 2 goals on 5 shots and had some choice words for coach Jim Montgomery on his way off the ice. Those two have since made up, and as according to Montgomery, it's now in the rearview mirror, but nonetheless, still an intriguing situation to watch. Can Jordan Binnington still really be the guy for Team Canada with an 878 save percentage so far this season? Elsewhere on our trade targets board, look, I think it's going to be really interesting to see which way the New York Islanders go this season. I think they want to try and build up and support this team, but they're going to have some tough calls to make. And the other standard sort of pending unrestricted free agents that we get to at this time of year that will most definitely be generating some interest. We still think the Toronto Maple Leafs have some decisions to make on their blue line, in particular Brandon Carlo going to be out for a bit. That complicates that trade scenario, of course. So let's take a peek into our chat here and see what's going on in YouTube. Nathan says, "Hey Frank, you're the best in the business. Thank you. Any news on the Hawks trade talk or at Bedard extension?" I don't anticipate a Connor Bedard contract extension being under the tree for the Blackhawks this holiday season, but I do think that they're going to check in or plan to check in with the Bedard camp at some point here over the next few weeks to see if there's any appetite to get a deal done. The ball is squarely in Connor Bedard's court. He's been so focused and intent on getting off to a great start to the season, which he has done, and making a case for Team Canada, which he most definitely has done, that the contract really hasn't been front of mind for him. He's just focusing on playing, and the rest will take care of itself. Hard to argue with that, and the Hawks are perfectly fine to let that play out. They're not in any rush. They know that he's committed, and look at the commitment that he's made to grow his game year over year. We had Blackhawks general manager Kyle Davidson on our Frankly Hockey show on Victory Plus today, and he talked about the noticeable difference that Connor Bedard has had in his skating. The overhaul of the mechanics that took place in one summer, very impressive for Connor Bedard. He's been noticeably and demonstrably faster when it comes to data and the eye test. Over in our BR app chat, what will the Isles do with all their injuries? We just touched on them briefly. The Islanders are in a spot where, man, it's been one thing after the other. Kyle Palmieri going down for 6 to 8 months with that torn ACL. You take a really consistent goal scorer out of their lineup and a guy who drags that team into the fight on a night-to-night basis, and it's tough to watch him out. I think they're teetering right on the edge. Maybe this is, one of those points in time where they stop and say, as magical as Matthew Schaefer has been, as much as this has given our franchise a shot in the arm, maybe this isn't our year to load up and add pieces, that maybe they need to consider what the market value prices are for some players that might not be part of the long-term future of the New York Islanders. So that's going to be one thing to keep in mind. Guys like Anders Lee and JG Pageau, all interesting names to keep an eye on as we get closer to the deadline. Sports Watcher wants to know anything on Quinn Hughes. No, nothing new there. Look, I think status quo for the Canucks. They're trying to make some decisions to move out some older players who, again, won't be part of their plan. Some guys that are pending unrestricted free agents, moving out some vets to bring in younger players. Age 25 and under was the very specific age scheme that I was told to look for. And they're trying to be more competitive to not just appease Quinn Hughes, but to get more competitive sooner to show him that they can be a team where he has a chance to win. And I've reported this elsewhere, including in Vancouver, that I believe Quinn Hughes is committed to the Canucks and hasn't really spent much time thinking about this overarching scenario that a lot of people want to have that conversation about in uniting with his brothers in New Jersey. I just, look, I think that's a ways off in the distance. Could that conversation change if Quinn Hughes raises his hand between now and the deadline and says that he'd like to move? Yes. I also just don't know that that's really in his nature or his DNA. So we'll see. Benny says, what's up with Artemi Panarin? Does the team want to move him? Does he want to re-sign with the Rangers? I think a lot will depend on the Rangers standings and where they're at. I think they're a team that's had some fits and starts this year, to be fair. I think they're a team that has potential, and I would view them as one that could go on a run and be one of the three, at least three playoff teams that come out of the Metro. So I'm still bullish on the Rangers. But if they are in a position where they are not making it or they're well outside of the picture, they're very likely to be moving Artemi Panarin. I think they've been thrilled with his impact. I think they've really enjoyed having him. I don't think they seem to be hung up nearly as much as the fan base is about his playoff contributions and ability to win with him. But the fact of the matter is Artemi Panarin wants a deal with term. He wants to be highly paid. And it's not that the Rangers are against paying him, but there are going to be limitations for Chris Drury, I believe, in the term that they're willing to offer Artemi Panarin. And I think he's thinking much more short term. I think the Panarin camp is probably thinking much more long term. And I don't know if there's a long-term marriage there, so to speak, based on some of those differences. But again, it's December. We've got a lot of time to figure that out. DC says, are the LA Kings looking to deal? Yeah, I think they're looking to support this team. I think they're looking to see if in a wide open Western Conference, whether or not the Kings can be a team that breaks through and finally gets over that first round hump. And if they do, why not be a team that slides on to the West Final? How much better or worse are the Kings than the Ducks, than the Sharks, who picked up a big win over the Utah Mammoth on Monday? How much better or worse are they than the Oilers, than the Golden Knights, who have scuffled over the last month? The Pacific Division has been all over the place, and I don't know that we've necessarily seen all of this level out in the way that it ultimately probably will, but I think we've seen enough from the LA Kings to know that they're probably going to be a pretty firm playoff team. The question is, can they do damage when they get in there? And with some support at the deadline from Ken Holland, I think that they can. All right, let's keep moving here on our BR Insider notebook here. Let's talk about the Nashville Predators and their game plan. And that part to me is the plan is what's most important. Have someone from the Nashville Predators, Barry Trotz, speak to us and help us understand what the plan is. I want to take you back to 2023. I'm in Toronto. I'm at the Ritz-Carlton, and I'm interviewing Barry Trotz on my podcast, and I'm asking him about the season outlook. It's November. And he says we're in for 3 to 5 more years of pain. Because David Poile had laid it out so clearly for the Preds on his way out into retirement. He traded away more than a quarter of the roster, stockpiled the organization with futures and picks, and they were ready to move in a different direction than the posture that they had been in for the last 15 to 18 years under David Poile's tenure, constantly trying to go for it, to be competitive, to be a team that has a chance to win the Stanley Cup. And sometimes you just need that reset. So that was put into place, and Barry Trotz takes over, and it's his first season, and he says 3 to 5 years of pain. It's on the record. You can go listen to it. That season, a real weird year for the Preds. They end up winning 15 games in a row, and they make the playoffs, and they lose to the Vancouver Canucks in 5 games in the first round. And somehow that plan of 3 to 5 years of pain, of overhauling the roster, of bringing in picks and prospects, was crumpled up and thrown out the window in an effort to sign Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, and Brady Shea. And so you take that, and now you're thinking, okay, we were a first-round playoff team, but can we be competitive right now in the mix? And they signed UC Saros to that 8-year contract extension, and. That's all well and good, but if you don't make the playoffs in the first year of that, and you not just miss the playoffs, but you finish in 28th place, and then the following season you're swirling at the bottom of the standings again, what's the next step? And everyone believes that the thought process is now to trade away some of those high-priced veterans, but you're going to have to do it for pennies on the dollar. You know, the return that's been floated as a wish list for Ryan O'Reilly is great, but that's the return from a few years ago when he went to the Toronto Maple Leafs at the deadline. That's not the return for what Ryan O'Reilly has played at now. And then you look at Jonathan Marchessault. I think that contract is really not crazy out of whack. The term isn't great, but I don't think the AAV is a killer. And Steven Stamkos hasn't played at a level that would warrant some significant interest at that cap hit. So are the Preds willing to retain salary on a transaction to move out some of those players? So that's really what the Preds are staring down. But what is the plan? What is the thought process? What is going to be the guiding light for the Nashville Predators for the next handful of years to get back into contention? We know that there's tough choices to be made, but when are those decisions going to start getting made for a team that really has shown no promise this season of being a team that's capable of doing much of anything at all? Let's turn our attention to the 2026 Winter Olympics, and we can talk about the rosters in a second, but also an interesting time because we're hearing rumblings that this arena that is supposed to host the Olympics in Milan is not only not on track, but some really concerning updates have emanated from Milan in the last few days. First off, the Milan organizing committee saying that there is no plan B, that there's no other place to host these games, that they're not looking to, move the game somewhere else. And that part has certainly raised a red flag because I know the NHL has done their best to stay out of it, knowing that this is an IOC controlled event. And two, that not only may the arena not be finished, and as recently as Halloween, there was no roof on the building, which is alarming, but that Pete DeBoer, part of the Team Canada coaching staff, shared earlier this week that the arena in Milan may be smaller. So we knew that it wasn't going to be Olympic size, but it was supposed to be built to NHL standards. Now, apparently, the rink that's being constructed is going to be even smaller than NHL standards by 3 or 4 feet. And it might not sound like much, but for a rink that's already feels like it's jammed with some huge bodies on a night-to-night basis, if you're not to now make it 195 by 85, just for theoretical sake, or even if it's on the width side, it's even worse. It drastically changes the game, and I think might even in some ways benefit a U.S. team that has been built on size and brawn and ability to check. That might make this a really interesting conversation for the roster construction part of it. So when we talk about the rosters, then let's talk about, what about Team USA in net? Connor Hellebuck out as the Winnipeg Jets are really struggling. And we know that he's likely to be back well before the Olympics and playing again for the Jets after getting his knee scoped. But what level will he be playing at, and what kind of pressure will that place on the decision for the other two goalies? Now, I would assume that Jake Ottinger is a lock to go with Connor Hellebuck, but then is the door wide open for the third spot? A lot of people had Jeremy Swayman penciled in. I'm going to raise you a Spencer Knight. I thought Thatcher Demko might have been in that spot earlier this season with his strong start to the season, and he was added to Team USA's long list. But Spencer Knight and the way that he's played, he's been head and shoulders above not just Joey Decord, but also head and shoulders above Jeremy Swayman. So the job that Spencer Knight has done as a younger guy, getting his first taste of full-time number one starting role for the Chicago Blackhawks, has been near Vezina caliber so far for the Hawks with the numbers that he's put up into early December. So that's one facet of the team to look at. What about the injury front? We know about Jack Hughes and both Brady and Matthew Tkachuk. Brady's now back, and the Sens coincidentally have lost both games since he started playing again. But Matthew Tkachuk is going to begin skating soon and anticipating a return sometime in early January for the Cats. We know that Jack Hughes is going to be reevaluated right around the new year after that freak hand injury, cutting his hand on glass at a restaurant. But what about on defense? Charlie McAvoy and his facial surgery that he had after taking a puck to the face. We expect him to be back, and what a brutal 12 months it's been for him on the injury front. This time now, again, playing for his father-in-law, Mike Sullivan, at the 2026 Olympics. But what about Jacob Slavin? There really hasn't been much talk about the Carolina Hurricanes stalwart, who doesn't really necessarily appear to be very close. He's been skating before Canes morning skates and practices, but he's hasn't played since October 11th. We're approaching 2 full calendar months since we've seen Jacob Slavin, and there hasn't been much panic, mostly because the Carolina Hurricanes have played so well in the face of all these injuries. But I'm just watching them all pile up for Team USA and thinking that this has made an already really difficult job that much more difficult for Bill Guerin and his management staff. And it's just added another layer of complexity to this. One name that I think we should see in Milan is Jason Robertson from the Dallas Stars, who has been so good this season. What a month of November. 13 goals in 15 games for Robertson. 26 points in that 15-game stretch, as the Stars are one of the best teams in the NHL. So just a few of the roster conundrum questions that we're talking about on the Team USA front, as we also keep an eye on this brewing arena situation. Rumblings that the test event that may have been scheduled for the arena in mid-January has also been pushed back and or canceled. So, man, that has been tough to watch. James says, I'm late. Who's getting the start in net for Team Canada? Speaking of the Olympic rosters. Yeah, I don't know how you put Jordan Binnington in there with the way that he's played this season. I assume that he'd be on the team because he had come up in such a clutch situation for Team Canada in the Four Nations Championship game, and that big game mentality that he has is awesome. But with an .878 save percentage after being yanked while allowing 2 goals on 5 shots on Monday, if it is truly a meritocracy, I know guys get a larger rope because of their track record and body of work to this point in the NHL. But man, Logan Thompson has been way better, and I'd advocate for Scott Wedgwood, who has proven that he can play with a really good team in front of him. If he's your number 3 guy, I think you could do a lot worse if you're Team Canada. So those would be the 3 guys that I'd have right now. Are the Florida Panthers going to add with Alexander Barkov out? I think that part remains to be seen, because we don't know how they want to approach this yet from a cap situation. Remember, they can go out and spend Alexander Barkov's money in full before the deadline. But if they go out and spend it in full, then Barkov is ineligible to return for the playoffs. So they want to get a better handle on the timeline that Barkov is expected to return before making that decision. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if that was the ultimate call, because the longer that timeline lingers, the tougher it is to have him even come back and be impactful. And a lot of experts that look and deal with ACL injuries in the knee suggest that it takes you, even if you're playing, it takes you a full year beyond that to really get back to your normal self. So I wouldn't necessarily hold my breath on Barkov, and the Panthers, of course, with the way that they've played to this point in the season, and understandably so, dealing with not just the Barkov and Kachuk injuries, but add in Luosterainen and Mikkola, and go down the list. It's been a tough start for the Florida Panthers, who are really just trying to tread water and hang on. Luckily for them and some other teams in the East, they're still kind of squarely in the mix because no one outside of Tampa and Carolina has truly differentiated themselves, and they're really essentially 1 week away, one good week away from being right back in the playoffs. With Fox out long term, I don't see the Rangers winning much, Christopher says. Hard to argue, but I still think the way that this team overall has defended has been a lot better. And I just mentioned the standings. Like, you mean to tell me the Rangers can't milk out 10 to 11 points for every 10 game segment? Like, that's going to keep them in the mix the way that this has gone. Sharks only looking to move. Purple Pilgrim says the Sharks only looking to move vets, or could we see a more future focused splash? I wouldn't necessarily expect a splash from the Sharks. I do think they're going to continue to move out some of their vets. I'd be very surprised if Mario Ferraro on D is still part of the Sharks on the other side of the trade deadline. I think Mike Greer has done a great job of trying to wring out some value from guys that he's added to the team over the course of the summer, taking salary cap dumps, etc. And that part has been really a smooth part of the San Jose Sharks operation in terms of building this all back up. So, I do think the Sharks are going to move out some vets. I don't know that they're going to swing a big futures trade because there's also a lot of other teams that are in the market. We just talked about Vancouver. The Hawks are going to be looking. Anaheim is going to continue to look. So there's a lot of teams, the Flyers, that are all playing in that same sort of space. Rinkrat says, where do you see Laurent Brossoit landing? Laurent Brossoit, the news today was that he was loaned to the Rockford Ice Hogs for a conditioning stint. Those typically last 2 weeks. So he's going to get a chance to play some games here moving forward. He has not appeared in a game since signing with the Chicago Blackhawks, not this past summer, but 2 summers ago, just dealing with a myriad of knee and hip injuries. Everything was connected, and he really had a detailed breakdown of how his body was failing him. But he's a giant of a man, and he's back playing. He's got that $3+ million cap hit that will make it a bit of a struggle to move him. But I think teams that have had real goaltending woes and issues this year could do a lot worse than monitoring his starts in Rockford to see what happens. Because if he's a guy that you can pluck off the scrap heap, my theory on goaltending is very simple. There are more goalies available, call it 150 for the 64 spots in the NHL. And you should be trying to grab as many of those guys as you can if that's how you're going to view your goaltending situation. If you don't have a Connor Hellebuck or Sorokin or Shesterkin type guy, that you want to get your hands on as many of those guys as possible to give yourself a chance to find the next one when inevitably at some point goaltending is voodoo. If your goaltending's failing you, swap that guy in for the next guy. Always have a list of 2, 3, 4 guys in your organization that you would feel comfortable using. And yes, the cap hit for Brossoit is going to make it a complicating factor, but certainly a name to watch, as the Edmonton Oilers, for instance, are one of those teams that's looking to improve their goaltending. They're going to give it a few weeks to see if it stabilizes, but if not, wouldn't be surprised at all to see Stan Bowman make a move, potentially even before that holiday roster freeze. Scotty says, Frank, what are your thoughts on Kiefer Sherwood to the Rangers? The New York Rangers need a player like this. I couldn't agree more, Scotty. I think he's a guy that hits everything that moves. He's been a double-digit goal scorer 3 years in a row, a model of consistency. And yes, he's on a bit of a shooting percentage bender for the Canucks this season. I think that Sherwood, particularly for a team that struggles in their middle and bottom six to score, why not grab a guy like him to see if he could fit? I could see that guy making a lot of sense, but again, I think it depends on the posture of the Rangers. Are they in the mix or are they not? And if not, it doesn't make sense to get into a bidding war with some other teams that would be willing to pay more for a rental like Sherwood, who hits the age 30 mark this season and probably wouldn't be a future longer term plan for the Rangers. Let's talk about some injury updates, because we had some news this morning with Leon Bichelle from the Dallas Stars, out 6 to 8 weeks, requiring surgery. And man, what a run for the Stars it's been on the injury front. One guy after the next. Nils Lundqvist out, Thomas Harley out. That means against the Rangers on Tuesday night, the Stars are dressing 3 American League defensemen, and they're not alone. The Tampa Bay Lightning have been in a very similar position for the last while, particularly with Victor Hedman out. And so it's been a string of injuries across the league. And the Stars, interestingly enough, I did some calculations today. They've missed 107 man games lost due to injury heading into tonight's game or including tonight's game. And with that, that's the 8th most man games lost due to injury so far in the NHL, but they have the league's second best record. So they've been unfazed by that. So Leon Bichelle going to miss significant time. And when you take a look at some of these injuries around the league, I mean, it feels like Logan Cooley dodging a bullet in Utah, coming back to play one game after that quad contusion and that scary collision with Toropchenko in St. Louis. That one was a tough one to watch. We touched on Adam Fox and him missing long term. So it feels like the story of this season, or certainly one of those stories, has been all of the injuries that have piled up. Derek wants to know, speaking of Logan Cooley, do you think the Mammoth do anything at the deadline? I think the Mammoth may be pressed into doing something well before that. And I think at this point in time, with the way their team has faltered, with the way their power play has faltered, I think it's fair to suggest that Andre Tournier's hot seat is getting turned up a bit. If you're thinking about it in heated seat terms, I would say that Andre Tournier has bumped up from the 1 red light to the 2. I don't think it's at scorching hot number 3, but definitely getting a little toasty and uncomfortable for a guy that has been with this Mammoth and Coyotes franchise for a while and has shepherded a lot of these young players to this point in their careers. The development has been impressive, but now it's time to win. And the Utah Mammoth know that this year. With that wide open West, it's not going to get any easier. Minnesota, Dallas, and Colorado have carved themselves out spots in the Central that I don't think are going to be toppled. So can you win one of those wild card spots? That's what they're up against. And their month of November was so poor. Their top 6 forwards hit a wall. They stopped producing. Their goaltending hasn't been nearly good enough. And I mentioned the power play, which has been so bad almost consistently all season long. I think it's certainly a time to give a peek to what's happening in Utah with their head coach in Andre Tournier. So keep an eye on that. We were thinking this might be a year of coaching job security, with more than a third of NHL coaches having changed over, being in their first full NHL season with their team. But I don't know that a bunch of these guys are out of the woods yet. And we mentioned Pete DeBoer, him lurking. I think a few teams are looking over their shoulder saying, if we're going to do this, we might as well at least get to a guy that's been to the conference final in 6 of the last 7 years in the West, which is a pretty crazy run. So we'll end with some sleeper teams, have a little fun. Which teams, speaking of Utah, do I think could be teams that go on a run? I could see Utah being one of those teams that I think they've got so much talent, one of the best young lines in hockey. I think when all their D is healthy, they've got another level to get to, and we've seen Karel Vejmelka carry this team before in net. They're one team that I would have an eye on in terms of being a team that could make a run. What about the Detroit Red Wings if they finally get some goaltending? I mean, you look at John Gibson since the trade to Detroit, he's in the bottom 5 of the league in save percentage among starters. His play has been really poor. I love Cam Talbot's contributions to the team, but I don't know how long he can sustain that or carry that. And the other team that I'd keep an eye on is the Ottawa Senators. Very quietly, without Brady Tkachuk, they went 13-5-4 and really held up their end of the bargain without him. Now that he's back, their captain, they've lost 2 in a row, but I still think the Sens are capable of a lot more, and I think they're a team that could get to making some noise in the Eastern Conference playoffs this year. They got a little taste last year. They got over that hump of getting in and how important that is, but I think if the Sens can find a way to add to that, they're going to be in a great position, because I think they're pretty stingy to play against, and they've been really consistent under Travis Green, which is a feather in his cap. That'll do it for today's NHL Insider Notebook here on the BR app. It's been great to hang with you guys for the last half hour or so. Looking forward to next week, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. You know where to find us, right here on YouTube as well as the BR app. Until then, enjoy the games and have a great day, everyone.